Hey, everybody. I'm back. So if you read the title, the weirdest thing happened, and I wound up in Saudi Arabia, of all places. I mean, who would have guessed I would have wound up in Saudi Arabia, right? But yeah, that's how it worked out. A buddy of mine has a cousin who lives there. And he just called me up just out of the blue. And he's like, hey, I'm going to go visit my cousin. And I talked to some guys, and a bunch of guys are going to go. So, why don't you come along? And I think he called me on a Tuesday to leave on Thursday. And I'm like, well, hold on. Like, I need a visa to go there. And they're like, oh, they got this new e-visa system. In the past, there was no such thing as tourist visas to visit Saudi Arabia. It was either a business visa or a religious pilgrimage visa, like a Hajj visa and Umrah visa. And they never just issued general tourist visas. Well, a few years back, during the blockade of Qatar, the Saudi government changed its attitude about this and, now allowed tourists to come visit just on a pure tourist visa. And they were setting up an e-visa system, so I went online, put the details in, paid a fairly expensive fee, and voila, had the visa right away. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that was pretty easy. So then Riyadh's about a 6-hour drive, so we left in the early afternoon, and it was weird when we got to the border. I was like, oh, okay, how's this going to work? And the guys had warned me that the Saudi border guards were pretty gruff and not that pleasant to deal with and just ordered you around and stuff. But the bizarre thing was actually they were pretty friendly. Easy to deal with. I gave them my stuff. They even wished me a pleasant day when they gave me my stuff back. I mean, the other guys were just like, what? Like, come on, what's going on here? But no, it was fine. And, oh yeah, and the fact that I was Canadian, we were wondering if that was going to be a problem. Because if you remember, a couple of years back, Canada and Saudi Arabia got into some spat about, I think the foreign minister of Canada tweeted about human rights or something, and the Saudis flipped out. And so we were wondering whether that would play a factor. No, it was fine. They didn't care that I was Canadian. So then from the Saudi border, off we went. Driving pretty fast through the desert. Like Saudi Arabia, once you cross over, it is true desert. And, the blowing sand dunes and stuff, it kind of got a bit strange because you see across the border, there's, towns and developments and stuff. But those businesses that were there relied on Qataris to cross the border to buy goods and things. And when the blockade happened, that business completely stopped. So as we drove through, like for about the first 50 kilometers, most of the businesses were abandoned. And you just sort of saw these shells of buildings and, the sand coming up to it and, partially covering it. Like even petrol stations, the whole works. It was weird. It was weird. It's actually pretty weird that I'm saying petrol station now instead of gas station, but okay, that's what they call it around here. And it wasn't until we got, about 50 kilometers out close to a city called Al Hessa that you started seeing a lot more businesses appearing again on the side of the highway. And then eventually we got to Riyadh. Now, I'd never been to Saudi Arabia before, so I really didn't have a reference for what it was going to be like. I mean, you always hear things like, how oppressive it is and that there's these religious police roaming around making sure, women stay covered and Muslims, are going to the mosques and all this sort of thing. And there was none of that. It was gone. Now, I knew that Saudi had liberalized quite a bit in the last few years. And I believe they got rid of those religious police and so forth. So when you got to Riyadh, which is a huge city, it's about 9 million people, it just seemed like any other Middle Eastern city. People were just kind of roaming around. There was no religious police. Women didn't necessarily have to cover their hair. Women could drive cars. Women could just wander around freely without having to have a man escort them around like you used to. So for me, it was just like, okay, we're just in, another Middle Eastern city. It looks quite nice. But the guys, the Qataris I was with, they were just amazed. I mean, most of them hadn't seen Riyadh for like 5 or 6 years because of the blockade and so forth. And they said, wow, like it was nothing like this before. Like, not even close. Like, it just, yeah, they couldn't believe how liberalized it had become. In fact, in some ways, maybe even a little more liberal than Qatar. There was no alcohol. I mean, I know there were some people saying, oh, they're going to bring alcohol in shortly, but I don't know. That sounds like it's a bit too big of a step for Saudi Arabia. So there was none of that. But there was, all sorts of fine dining restaurants. And, you'd go in there and there'd be just tables filled with like Saudi women and stuff, just all, sitting there on their Snapchats and their Instagrams, taking photos of trendy places to post and things like that without any escort. And even the Qataris were just kind of a bit, okay, it's like Kuwait now or something. So we were only there for a weekend, but the only time I kind of noticed something that definitely made me stand out that, yeah, okay, we're definitely in Saudi Arabia and we're not in another Middle Eastern country, was the hotel we were staying at. The pool was indoors, had no windows around it whatsoever, so there was no way anyone from outside could look into the pool. And there were separate times for men and women. Men could go for 2 hours, and then it was women's time for 2 hours, and then men's for 2 hours, and women's for 2 hours. It was a bit odd that you were like, okay, if I want to go use the pool, I have to use it during certain hours, because otherwise it's for women. And sure enough, when I went there was a man there with his young children. His wife did come by just to chat with him a bit, but she didn't go swimming. I don't know. But other than that, yeah. And being in an indoor pool where there was like no windows at all made it kind of, dark and, it was a pool. So we went outside to the edge of the plateau. Riyadh's on a plateau on a mountain, and then overlooked the cliff face, and overlooked the scenery. We had a guide who was telling us the history of the area, and when the people first came to settle in Riyadh, and he said it was thousands of years ago, but okay, I'll take his word for it. And then, it was just a matter, we were going to restaurants, we went to the souk. At the souk, I got a marriage proposal from a Saudi guy. I'm sure it was a bit tongue-in-cheek, but yeah, I mean, he came up and he's like, oh, and in English, he's like, oh, are you single? Oh, you should marry my daughter then. You should marry my daughter. Even showed me a picture of her. And meanwhile, I'm just like, who are you? who are, what? No. No offense, but no. Yeah, the guy's got a kick out of that. But I guess another thing that I didn't notice, I mean, many of the people in the souk, like there's a big open area where people are just spreading out big blankets and just selling, the most random stuff sometimes, like cassette tapes and, just kind of junk that they found or whatever. Some stuff was, reasonable, like, Arabic coffee pots and things, but there was just all sorts of stuff there. And, it was mostly Saudis. And, there is a wealth discrepancy in the country, and it's pretty big. A lot of Saudis, are in poverty and so have to, do these kinds of things to earn a living. Any gas station that we went to, there's typically a Saudi there, going to the cars begging for money and stuff, which was really quite sad. In the souk, there were ladies. I'm assuming they were Saudi. I don't know. They were typically covered, in a hijab and a niqab. And, they were begging for money too, or just selling little trinkets here and there. Something you would never see a Qatari or an Emirati or a Kuwaiti do, because those countries are, much wealthier. Now, Saudi does have a lot of money, but it also has a lot of people. I think they have 20 million, 25 million citizens at the moment in that country. Qatar has 300,000 citizens. I think the Emirates has like 400,000. I think Kuwait, it's something like a million, So while Saudi does have a lot of oil and a lot of wealth, it also has way more people, which makes it a little more difficult to, distribute the money, I guess, a bit more evenly, plus a huge royal family. So, then Saturday morning came along, we had breakfast at a nice place, and boom, we were gone because it was another 6-hour drive back. Again, didn't have any trouble at the border. So, yeah, I mean, visiting Saudi Arabia was definitely entertaining. I was surprised at how much it was similar to just any other Middle Eastern place. The guys were surprised at how much it had changed in the 5 or 6 years. But overall, it was a good trip. Some of the guys are talking about, maybe later this year we'll go out and see some other parts of Saudi Arabia, because my visa is a multi-entry. I have multi-entry visa for a year. But yeah, at the moment we got to get a PCR test and every single time, which is annoying. So I don't know. Well, there's talk that maybe the GCC will do a almost like a bubble where they'll recognize the vaccinations from the other GCC countries, so you don't have to take a PCR test to travel within the Gulf. That would be nice. But otherwise, yeah, there's a good chance maybe I'll go back to another part of Saudi Arabia, maybe later this year or early next year with some of the guys. So, yeah, that's the update I wanted to tell you. I went to Saudi Arabia. I survived it just fine. And, due to the changes, it doesn't seem to be quite the same as, we had always envisioned it from the past. And it seems to be just kind of progressing along into a relatively normal Gulf country. Anyway, talk to you later. Bye.